With us now, CNN law enforcement analyst Josh Campbell and CNN legal analyst Shan Wu. Josh, I'd like to begin with you just due to your long experience with the FBI. There's been a lot of talk about just how important, weighty, or useful this FBI investigation will be. You've heard Republicans say that, listen, all they're going to do is submit what's called a 302, basically witness statements, and then not make any judgment, etc. How valuable can that be? Then you have Democrats saying a week. Listen, you're not going to learn much. There should be a longer time frame here. But in a week, because even James Comey has said the FBI can accomplish a lot. Based on your experience, how valuable is this time they've been given and the leeway, at least as far as we know, that they've been given to do this?
So there are a lot of questions surrounding this investigation. I'll tell you, I once had a drill instructor tell me that ability is what you do, character is who you are. In this situation, no one is questioning the judge's qualifications. There's no criminal investigation that's looking into illegality. It's simply a question of character. Is this person suitable to sit on the United States Supreme Court? And in this case, the FBI is operating as an investigative arm of the White House. The White House is their client. They're going back and looking at the judge's past to determine, is he suitable? That's a determination that will be made by the White House. The question you bring up is a good one, because at the same time that the White House is saying we're calling in the FBI to dig into this, we're giving them quote-unquote free rein, we're learning that that's not consistent with our reporting. There are guardrails that are being put on this investigation, parameters that permit the FBI to only go so far and to only look at certain things. Now, that's within the purview of the White House. They can ask the FBI to follow certain leads, but at the end of the day, with this arbitrary one-week deadline looking into this, I don't think that it is realistic to say that this is a thorough investigation and to put that stamp of approval on it from the FBI when there are limitations placed on it from the outset.
One thing to note, though, there is a bit of precedent here, and that is the Anita Hill investigation, which took 3 days. Now, that's a different situation, similar in some ways that, all witnesses were not called in that testimony, and they were not called this time around either. But that took 3 days. At the same time, it was Democrat Chris Coons who asked for this 1 week, right? So Democrats crying foul now, saying it's not long enough. It was Coons who went to Flake and said, let's give it a week, let's do this. Shan, to you, this 302 report that the FBI comes up with, right? Not a judgment, but here's what we found in this probe. That goes to the White House. Is there any obligation for the White House to turn that over to anyone? To Congress, to the Judiciary Committee, to the American people?
I think there's a moral obligation for them to do that,
but do
to
they
show this
have to?
Transparent, but not legally, no. In fact, usually in prosecutions, criminal investigations, as Josh well knows, there's a big fight over, when you have to turn over the 302. So they're not under any legal obligation to do that. It's not even a criminal investigation. But I think, one thing people are not understanding, is very easy to understand this misunderstanding. Background checks are actually normally much broader than criminal investigations. Criminal investigation is very tightly focused. The agents and the prosecutor constantly in contact to make sure they're staying on target. The background check is to find anything possibly derogatory and present that to the potential employer. So here you have the potential employer trying to make sure they don't learn too much, which really kind of distorts the normal purpose.
Of course, imagine that in Washington, there's a lot of debate about the substance of this and what's reasonably within the range of this. I know, because I've been asked questions about people I know in their own FBI background checks about things like this. How did they drink? How much did they drink?
Right.
What was their behavior like, etc. Josh, you spent a lot of time in the FBI. I know that you personally did not do background checks to my knowledge, but to your knowledge of background checks, give us a sense of what is reasonably within the range when you're considering people for public office.
So it's a good question, Jim. And, when new agents come in, typically their first office, we're sent to an applicant squad. And that is this particular team that looks into the history of people that are applying for employment with the FBI or, other federal agencies, with the FBI serving as that investigative arm. So you kind of learn that process, that this is the scope, this is what we look at. Again, it's a question of suitability. You're not necessarily looking for illegality. And as Shan mentioned, that gives you kind of a wider aperture to really look at what is this person made of? And it's not a conclusion that the FBI is looking into for their own interests, that they're wanting to make sure that there's someone on the Supreme Court who's of suitable character. This is something that the White House does. Every White House appointee that goes to the FBI is that same charge. Look at this person, look at his background or her, and determine if they are suitable. The question I think surrounding this, and we hit on a little bit earlier, is this 1 week time frame. Now, I have serious issue with this because it is so arbitrary. In this case, what we've talked about, we have parameters that are in place. We can only look at certain things. But what happens in the course of an interview when someone someone provides you new information or someone provides you the names of other potential witnesses. We've been reporting here at CNN over the weekend that the interview with Ms. Ramirez, for example, did yield additional potential witnesses. So the question would be, is the FBI permitted to run that down and look at it, or is this merely a check-the-box exercise?
Shan, to you, James Comey, in his op-ed, said a lot of interesting things. One of the most notable, I thought, was that he clearly thinks that Judge Kavanaugh perjured himself. Let me read this to you. He said, they, meaning the FBI, also know that little lies point to bigger lies. They know that obvious lies by the nominee about the meaning of words in a yearbook are a flashing signal to dig deeper. Aside from James Comey's opinion of whether or not Judge Kavanaugh was forthcoming or not, what do you make of what he writes here and following, you know, that indication? Because Republican Senator Jeff Flake, a key swing vote, said if it is proven that he wasn't fully honest in that testimony or lied, that's disqualifying for him. What do you make of Comey's assertion here?
You know, people may think what they want about James Comey, but he's clearly a very skilled investigator. And I completely agree with his take that there are lots of flashing lights in the judge's testimony. I mean, the positions he's taken, very questionable as to credibility. And we're already seeing publicly disclosed lots of people questioning his statements about drinking. And again, it's not whether he actually drank or not, it's whether he is credible in telling the truth about that. And I agree with Josh's concern over the limit on time in the investigation. You know, I co-wrote an editorial with Senator Coons in which we called for certain types of terms and conditions to look for in the hearings. And let's keep in mind, that was a political compromise that he and Senator Flake had to make. They wanted to have a pause, and now it's important that if that pause develops other leads that need to be pursued, that they not just stick to this one-week timeline like it's completely set in stone.
Thank you both, Josh Campbell, Shan Wu, very much.